That's right. We're at the Sifters Summit today.
How's it going? Day two. With roundtable was yesterday. We had the. Are we doing any more today?
No, today is me standing in public places and bumping into people and chatting to them.
Just is it bumping in or strategic placement?
Strategic placement. So it's where the crossway between the speaker's lounge and the steps to that and the routes to the main stage.
Oh,
So basically everybody walks past that part, right?
I love it. Who's the most interesting person you've bumped into today?
Oh, a lot of it is people we know. So it's like our board members are here, like our advisors are here. So it's catching up with them. There's a guy called Daniel as well. So he's doing very well for himself, young person. I'm not sure what's publicly announced by him, so I'm not allowed to say. I'll be careful. I don't want to get him in trouble. But doing
We
very,
won't.
very well for himself from a very underprivileged background. He's opened up a lot of doors, done really incredible work.
Phenomenal. Look, we got you on the show today, not only because you're at Sifter, we want to hear the vibes on the ground, but because the funding report came out. We've just been on stream talking about it, sort of giving an overview. I want to touch on a couple of things. One, why is this important right now?
I think one of the big things when it comes to diversity, right, is so much is just anecdotes. And when it's just that, it's just stories. And it's like, it's hard to really quantify, right? Is there actually even a problem? Because you talk to different people and different people have different experiences. And trying to get the overall perspective is really important. And look at this report, it's the first of one of many, right? So every year we'll do this and we'll build on it each year. But it really starts to highlight like what's the actual, where are the real issues, if there are issues as well. We could have found actually Asians are massively overfunded and they don't need any support. But that's really important because if you don't have that data, you're kind of going off vibes and you can't make good business decision off vibes. And even working with the corporates, we're working with governments. If we can show that this is a situation, like we want to try and make a change in this area, and we've got a way to now measure our impact over the long term by looking at the entire ecosystem. And if you don't have that measurement, you're kind of just like asking people to trust you. And at the beginning, cool. When you're scaling, that's not the way it goes. And for those of you who've got startups, at the beginning, it is all about that trust in the founding team. As you want to go to your Series A, Series B, Series C, that's about the metrics. And we're not a startup in that sense, but it's a similar kind of thing. Beginning stage, trust. Later stage, what's the numbers?
Clear. What was the most eye-opening set of numbers that you came across? I've got them in front of me. For me, it was definitely the Asian co-founders at 18.6% and the regional focus based in London. With the overall funding went to founding teams with at least one Asian co-founder, 18.6% you found. Was that eye-opening, or was that something that you thought, actually, no, that's about right?
It's really interesting. I think the really important point about that, which I don't want to get lost either, is that like, it's not us versus their mentality that we're trying to
Agreed.
portray here, right? And it's awesome that, okay, so 7% is like all Asian co-founding teams. But how great is it that, okay, Asians are working with other groups of people and other ethnicities, and it's just the best people for the job working together. So 18.6 is great, but also when you look at it in terms of where the funding is going to, so 25% of London is Asian heritage.
Mm-hmm.
So when you look at that, then it's like, oh, actually, maybe that 18% could be improved upon, right? And this is an interesting dynamic of having to work things out. And as we go further, look at the socioeconomic backgrounds too, right? Because if many people in these regions are from like working class backgrounds, or is it the Asians getting funded and mainly from the wealthier backgrounds? And that's the things we're trying to work out. Like, how do we extrapolate that? Because it should be an alliance of people working together from these backgrounds, which may be overlooked, rather than it being an antagonistic relationship. And the bit about London you mentioned there is, again, super interesting because, okay, one, there's obviously a lot of Asians in London, but 43% of Leicester is Asian, Bradford, like these other places. So how come is it that like the other ethnicities is getting funded in some of these other regions, but then London is, or like Asians always seem to be going to London, and what's the cause behind that? And you can see like on the report as well, like the further breakdown of exactly how that looks. But it's a very interesting dynamic. And what's been exciting for us is we get the longitudinal data. Because the sample size is fairly small for the regions,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to draw conclusions. But as you do this every year, and we're going to go backwards in time as well for next year's report, you can see, okay, is this a trend, or is this just so because the sample size is small, then actually one or two companies make such a difference to data, it's then irrelevant. And even on that point, 18.6%, that one thing that's really fascinating is that the companies with over 50 million raised, 10 out of 52 had an Asian co-founder.
Hmm.
So that skews the data massively because if the bigger rounds have an Asian co-founder, so one in particular to highlight is Isomorphic Labs. So they raised 468 million alone, and that's because the founder of it is the guy who founded DeepMind. So it's very easy. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to swear to
You are.
raise that amount of money. You've got that kind of background, right? And that's pretty interesting because that one round was more than a third of the total raised by Asian startups.
And so
And this is
skews
the
the data completely out of proportion.
yeah, and that's why we kind of go further down into the funding stages and what it looks like at different levels. And it's kind of a really interesting puzzle where you've got the highlight key stats, but as you go into that nuance, is where you can really learn more and more.
For you, what was the biggest takeaway in terms of the recommendations that are required? I've got them up in front of me right now. Um, Supporting agent fund managers and accelerators, expand access to non-dilutive capital and targeted grant schemes, and then future-proof founders and build those skills. It feels like the last one you're already doing. It's been in motion for the
Mm.
past 5 years. With the first two, what does that concretely look like?
So with the fund manager side, so there is the British Business Bank who've got a 500 million mandate
Hmm.
to be backing diverse fund managers, and that's diverse fund managers of all kinds, right? So it's ethnicities and different things. And what it's looking at is like how is that. And I think one of the really key important things about all of this stuff is that it can't just be like, oh, just because you're Asian, you get funded, or just because you're a woman, you should get funded. It's got to be how do you showcase you're investing in the people that should be invested in that aren't right now? And that's the key thing when we're looking at these funds is that those funds have got to be going to the best fund managers, the people with the best access to networks, the best value add to those communities too. And how that 500 million is used is really important. It can't just be to whoever's got the most LinkedIn followers or whoever's got like the connections to like through their family, whatever it is. It's got to be going to who's going to unlock the investment for those people who are overlooked the most. And on the grant side, it's a really fascinating thing because it's for everybody, right? It's not just for Asians. It's that the grant system is very opaque and confusing for so many people.
Hmm.
And the more work we can do with governments and we can do with like the social foundations of like how do you unlock that? How do you make it clearer to people what opportunities are available? Because for many people, going for venture capital at the beginning is the wrong idea. You can get non-dilutive grants, and like for those of you like if we use the less jargon term, like non-dilutive basically means free money, right? Take the free money before you take investment. Like don't give away equity, don't give away part of the company if there are grants out there that can support you. But if you don't know there's a grant exist, you don't know it's an option. And like, how do we change the narrative around that? Because sometimes what happens, like, if you've got a mate who happens to work at Innovate UK, you get a grant.
Hmm.
But is that because you're better than those other people, or is it because you happen to have connections? And how do we open up that connection network?
And not just everyone be nepos.
Yeah, and like looking at the other side as well. So the final one is also what we're working on a lot, and so obviously we're the community for like high growth Asian entrepreneurs and founders, right? But a big part of the impact is like it shouldn't be we're only helping that group because the more we work with other groups too, and like with our incubator is currently open right now, right? So anybody listening who wants to start a company, it's completely free. It's 6 weeks, and through that incubator, you can get like workshops from me. You'll get direct feedback on your ideas. We take you through like assignments, all of that stuff, and through that, we're directly teaching people is one thing, but giving them the feedback because people don't get the feedback they need. And you see so many people, and it's really frustrating to me. People work on their idea for a long time, and I can tell in the first 5 minutes this is like not going to work, but nobody's telling them that, and nobody's. It's not about it's not going to work, but it's like okay, this is a challenge. How are you going to overcome that challenge, and how do you think about it in this light? But if nobody gives you that awkward question, you're just screwed. And if people keep telling you, "Oh, it's a great idea," but you're not getting invested in because of whatever it is, or because of this, or because of that, you're not doing them a favor. You're keeping them down a path which is like unrealistic. So that educational piece about who is ready for venture scale funding, what
Hmm.
type of funding is best for you? Is this a business which has legs and is viable? What's the skills that you're missing that maybe you need, or how do you build out your founding team? That's really important learning that people need to have that they're not getting right now, and we want to change that.
Through all of this research, working with the partners, like getting into the nitty gritties and like deeply understanding where are the broken elements of all of this, what was hard about putting this research together?
If you ever work for data from these places, it's a nightmare because it's one is separating out the different like data points. Like for example, we excluded companies that are over 10 years old because Aston Martin raised a bunch of money, but Aston Martin isn't really a startup. I think we can all agree on that, right? So what's the right metrics to use for that? How do you
Mm-hmm.
do these lines? What's the right line to do? Like
Are
these kind
you
of
are you
always small
sitting there
decisions.
sort of figuring out what those lines are?
So well, we did the lines for this report, right? And it's going to be interesting when people give us feedback on it, whether they agree to the lines we did. And we also did 500K as a minimum round because under 500K, most of them aren't reported.
Mm-hmm.
So that data at that level is so weak that it's going to be it's not going to reflect reality. With 500K plus, I guess more likely to have the correct data where it's been reported and we can know working with the right data. And the other thing is obviously how do you identify the um, the people? So somebody's waving at me from downstairs. Uh, so how do you identify what's Asian heritage, what isn't? And that was a massive struggle. So we use so there's like five different people who did that, and then it's looking at people from different parts of Asia. You can't necessarily tell just from their names. There's a lot of research that goes into that, and obviously the obvious thing, like if you've got an Asian name, and then like your profile has that background, or you went to school in China, you're probably going to be Asian, and we're going to make these like realistic assumptions. What we're going to improve for next year is we're going to get the data at a more regular basis, and then we want every single person we count as Asian that we've personally validated, and that person has said that they identify in that way. And because there's about 4,500 founders of the 2,300 companies that were raised, we could like that's too much for us to like, reach out to and get a response to this year. But next year is like, how do we learn from this? How do we make it better next year? And it's
Mm-hmm.
always an interesting thing where I start up live. So we did this one, great, cool. Next year it's going to be better and much more complete. And this is just a baseline, and we're going to make it better and better.
On the topic of making things better and better, we got the book here.
Awesome, thank
Smashed
you.
it, smashed it out within a month. What was the process of building this thing like, writing this thing? You optimized for hardness, and
Yep.
quite literally. And I've gone through the book. Which was your favorite chapter?
Oh, I love all my children the same, but I'm trying to think. So the chapter 8, I think about networking. That
Yeah.
was originally going to be a book. So there's going to be another book coming out called Networking for Outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that's one of like my greatest strengths, right? I mean, complete nobody, grew up in like random place in Ilford, East London. I was able to grow a network in the last 3 years. It's now the size it is. And it's like, okay, there's so many people who've got the talent, they've got the skills. And it's not just Asian, it's people from all different backgrounds. Maybe it's like state school, maybe it's from the region they were born in, what like the way they identify, whatever it is. How do you get them to get in the rooms where things are happening? Because if they're not in their rooms, they're automatically got a disadvantage. And like that chapter I'm particularly passionate about. But also it's like the way it's structured, like the first three chapters, I think, the like how to find a problem, how to
Mm-hmm.
find like customers, all that stuff. Those like it's very much structured in the most first three chapters, the most important chapters for any business. Because everybody jumps to funding. But if you do the problem solution correctly, funding becomes easy.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a good business, funding's easy. If you're trying to focus too much on how to get funding ready, but if you just create a good business, people want to fund you. And there's chapter 7, I believe, which is the one-page startup script, and that basically consolidates the first 7 chapters into one page. And if you can do that really succinctly, it's built in a way to like do a business case, but it's also exactly the same thing as you do for a 90-second pitch. Like whatever your startup plan is, you need to know those key details, and that's what gets you where you want to go.
I personally like number 3 because it's all about attention, and it's the in vogue thing: distribution, attention, building brands,
Yeah.
the hero's journey. When you were writing that, did you look at your like sort of life arc in the past 5 years?
Yeah, so that's really interesting because I think there's probably some things in there you might find quite like, surprising about what I do and how I frame that chapter. Because one of the big things I think is that personal brand right now is a massive hype and it's a very effective distribution channel, but it's not the only distribution channel. And right now you're hearing from everybody you have to have a personal brand. It's like you don't. Like, and I think the example used in the book is there's over 150 unicorn founders in the UK. You couldn't name 10 of them probably, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might be able to because of what you do. Most people listening cannot name 10 unicorn founders. Like there's a couple thousand billionaires. Most of us can't name them. And the correlation between who's most active publicly versus who's actually got the most successful companies isn't necessarily that strong, because some of the most successful people, they're so busy meeting demand, then they don't need to post, or they're not thinking in that way, because they've got other problems. And it's like your problems change as you grow in different ways. So I think that key thing I think about there is that, like, yes, content is a really effective channel, but also if you feel like you've got other things that you're really strong at, go for those too. Like, there's not a one size fits all approach. I think it's really important, and that's why I try to get across in that chapter. It's like, here's your different options. Pick whichever one you think can be the best at, and smash it. Whatever you're going to do.
It's you're right, not one size fits all. You got to lean into the strengths and figure out what works there and double down on those. Don't focus on the weaknesses all at the same time.
Mhm.
That last
Yeah.
chapter on exiting, given that we haven't
Mhm.
exited the business yet, right? And at some point that might come down the line. This is this is for me, BAE is probably going to be your life's work. Was it difficult writing that last chapter, having not actually gone through the motions of it?
So I guess like my key unfair advantage in writing that book, right, is that, like, I've probably met more exited founders in a way where I'm off the cuff with them
Mm.
than most people in the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Because, and one interesting thing there, like, the podcast is one thing, but it's off the podcast chat. That's where I know all the gossip and all the dirt, right? Because the stuff that people can't say online. And that's where I can try and give those tips to people. So, like, on our board, like, I think every founder on the board is like exited company. And like, I can see that journey. And also, I'm seeing how people are looking at it now. And there's so many founders, for example, 5 years into the business, they're now trying to work out how to exit a company. And the reality is, which is very difficult for many people, is like the IPO path is very uncommon in the UK. And what's fascinating about that is that you look at Eric Schmidt, who was here yesterday at Sifted Summit, so CEO of Google. And what he was saying, and I think it's true, is that too many UK founders are trying to look for a acquisition exit rather than building $100 billion company.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to change the UK ecosystem, but is that some people shooting for $100 billion company? The nuance to that is that that's an incredibly fucking stressful thing to do. Sorry, can't remember from last. So, but building $100 billion company is incredibly difficult and incredibly stressful. And the only way you get there is by having something in your brain that keeps you going when you can tap out earlier. You can sell for 100 million, you can live a good life. Why do you continue at that point? And that's the interesting thing is like, okay, how do we keep those giant companies still going where they don't even think about exiting? And you look at it, for example, Stripe is a great example, right? Stripe is still private, even
Mm-hmm.
though they're so large, because they're optimizing in a different way. They're playing a longer game. The founders of that could have like just like sailed off into the sunset ages ago if they wanted to, but they're playing a game and they're trying to do things in a really fascinating way. And there's games within games in this stuff. I'm now getting sunburned, so I'm going to switch my view.
With BAE, do you think there's an exit long term, or do you not even consider one?
With BAE, it's interesting because the current organization, there's like the structure of it. So a lot of it's impact driven. So that's not very exitable. And then you've got the more private stuff we do. And again, so much of it right now is very heavily focused around power of persona, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that people know me, they know my co founder, they like us, that's where they back it. The long term goal of it, I don't think is an exit necessarily. It might be I step away into a more chairman role, but it won't be that we sell the business, I don't think. Because if we can get this profitable, then we're paying ourselves well. And how I look at it as well, because I think when we started out, it was like, okay, let's be martyrs here. Let's just not pay ourselves. Let's do that. It's like, no, for this to work well, we need to be a business that's making money because it's proving value. And by doing that correctly, we're then also proving the concepts of what we're teaching. Because if I'm teaching people stuff, but I'm also not making money, that doesn't make any sense. And as we get through the process, like, okay, I've got great connections about like that. But if I'm not making serious money, then I'm talking from oh, this is what I've heard, or this is what I know this. And that's got to change. And I'm excited for this chapter of what we're building now is that, like, 6 months ago, we were nearly bankrupt. We're not bankrupt now, right? And now we're going from strength to strength. And people will see, like, oh, you're doing so well. It's like, I remember what it was like 6 months ago. I remember when I wasn't sure if we could pay the office and I wasn't sure if we could do that. And that's what people don't see and people forget. But that is a key thing about who I am and the resilience that we have, is that we're not going to forget that. We know what it's like to nearly break. So we're going to take this to next levels and next heights, and we're not going to get complacent. And whether or not we exit it, I don't think it's necessarily built in that structure. There could be other investment vehicles we do in the future as a conglomerate where that could make sense. But the core business is that very impact focused. And to me, it's more about how do you get the next leader after me and after Gervir to take that to something which people forget we even existed because they've gone so much further than we did. And like it should be, I want to be forgotten because in 10 years' time, whoever the leader is has done so much better than we have because we set that foundation up for them and we got them in the right position at the right time.
The goal is not to build the legacy. The goal is to build the institution.
Yeah, I always look at it as Cancer Research UK, right? Who founded it?
God knows who founded it.
Exactly. But everybody knows Cancer Research UK. That's the goal of BHQ, right? 10 years' time, 20 years' time, 30 years' time, wherever it is. Do people just know BHQ and trust BHQ? And this is the whole interesting thing about personal brand goes faster, but the real test and the real challenge of whether I'm doing this correctly is can it outlive me? And if it can outlive me, I've really built something as an institution.
With that long-term vision, but sorry, the oxymoron of what kind of like what exists today in the parasocial relationship you have with people, it must be very odd just having individuals come up to you just at Sifted and be like, "Hi, Amar, like you don't know me, but I've consumed everything." What's that like?
It's the funny thing now is obviously it's like there's like hundreds of hours of me online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the challenge is too, people who have met me before, if I've only met you for a couple of minutes, my brain just I can't handle it, right? So say like Dunbar's number, right? 150 people. I've like today and yesterday I met over like even on Tuesday night with 200 people coming. Like I talk to all of them, I can connect the dots, but I can't. They can't be friends, and that's the difficult thing about my position. Is that what I try to do is build in the most friendly way possible. Try to make sure I'm welcoming, but I also need to set that boundary where there's a limit in what I can do because if I'm eating £1,000 a month, if I go for coffee for all of them, like the math just doesn't math right. I can't go for 1,000 coffees a month. It just doesn't work. And that's one of my key difficulties in the people pleasing aspect is like, well, I need to focus on what scales and what makes a bigger difference. So say, for example, if we have a podcast too, for me coming on this means that a bunch of people at once can hear these thoughts, whereas I can have the same conversation like 100 times with 100 different people instead. What's
Mm-hmm.
more effective? And I've got to focus on the effectiveness. And for some people that can make it, it's a transition I'm going to go through where some people are going to not like me because I don't have the time anymore. And oh, he's changed, or oh, I thought he was like this. But it's like they've also got to understand the pressure I'm under. And I'm like, my HQ where it is because I'm working like a dog. And if I keep going for coffees and stuff, the work's also got to get done. And it comes out of my sleep, or it comes out of my family time, or the time I have my friends, the time looking after myself. And I think that's a hard thing. Like at some point, we're going to get to the stage where things are under control, and I will have free capacity. But right now, I don't have free capacity. If I'm giving you time, it's coming out of something else.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's my health. Sometimes that means I'm not going to the gym or I'm not doing the things I should be doing. And at the end of the day, if I want to make it an institution, I've got to be around to guide that for the long term.
Look, before we let you go and crack on with the rest of Sifted and meet all of these incredible individuals and actually spend the time with them and the board members, etc., one thing we love to do with the guests on the show is ask them like top 4 Mount Rushmore of founders. Who are they for you? It's a nice little data set we're building here.
Yeah, but I say, it's like, the whole thing, I love my children equally. Um, okay, I'm gonna big up our board because obviously we picked them for a reason, right? Of like what they've done and like what they bring to the table. So Dimple Patel, who's the CEO of Nature Metrics right now, Series B company. She's sold 2 companies before, but she came from a council estate in Leeds. So it's like that story and what she's been able to achieve from where she came from. That to me is like the story that people need to hear. You've got Asesh Sarkar, another guy, so inner city Leicester, like went to a state school, comprehensive. He runs Salary Finance. They're $100 million revenue company which is profitable, and they've lent out over a billion, well over £1 billion now, and it's to people on low incomes so that they don't get the predatory terms. So like the amount of good he's done for those people, like hands down to him, right? Like super admire him. You've got Bindi Carrier. So she was the one who set up the Microsoft Accelerator. And then she's the early stage, so she set up like some of the early stage banking at SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. And like what she's done for the ecosystem as like one of those OGs for the tech ecosystem in the UK, like is incredible. She's on the boards of like she's on the board of UEL, she's on the board of like Stratford Theatre, all these kind of different things. Done incredibly well for herself, and like really pioneered our voices in different places. And then last but not least, so Jay Goodrow. So he is currently founder of we've got Record. But he's exited a company when he was a student called Grad Lance, I want to say. I might get that wrong. And then he works in incubators, accelerators. He helps out Block Dojo. He's had different roles, but he's doing now incredibly well at his current company. And they're scaling and doing really well under the covers. And it's
Amar,
a blockchain for like farming and stuff, right? So it's a really interesting idea. It's very different. They're doing really well.
love it. Amar, thanks so much for the time. Thanks for deep diving with us on the report as well. And obviously, we love the new book. We'll plug it where we can. Have a
Awesome, man.
blast.
Thanks so much.
Enjoy
Good
the
to have
rest
you.
of the day.
Good to be here.
Try and have fun networking.
Do you know, I said great to have you. It's my podcast host coming out, right?
Yeah.
Thanks
I
for
know the
having me.
feeling. Pleasure's all mine, my friend. See you soon.